I'm Tony Walton, a volunteer and board member with the Foundation. I'm privileged to shepherd these proceedings through the program. So Brian Bayliss is the president of the County Foundation and will be our webinar presenter today. With him will be Anne Van Vleck, the Foundation's Vital Signs Coordinator. Brian and Anne were the driving force developers of the report on which this webinar is based. With our research specialist, Judith Zelmanovitz, they produced a 57-page report containing intriguing and interesting comments and data regarding the impacts of COVID-19 and our responses to those impacts. So on with the program. Mayor Steve Ferguson was a hardworking councillor for many years before being elected mayor in late 2018. Now he's even busier. Nothing, however, could have prepared him for the onslaught of COVID-19, its impacts, and the variety of responses needed to head towards recovery. Steve, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being here with us this morning. The microphone is yours.
But thank you, Tony, for the introduction, and to Brian and Anne for the invitation to say a few words of introductions to these presentations. The municipality welcomed the opportunity to support the County Foundation's work in this report that looks at the social impact of COVID-19 on Prince Edward County. The findings really drove home for all of us the idea that even when we get the virus under control, and we will be living with the pandemic and its effects for many years to come. And it's a sobering message, but one we need to hear and fully grasp as we turn our attention to recovery in 2021 and beyond. The report and the ongoing work of the County Foundation will help inform the actions of the municipality as we head down the path to recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic and its effects continue to unfold. Infection numbers continue to vacillate throughout the province, including here in our health unit. ICUs are at capacity. Our residents are stressed, but they're coping. Our businesses are managing, and the lockdown that we are currently in may be extended until early June. However, the encouraging news is that vaccine distribution has increased and the number of COVID cases in the county remains very low compared to almost everywhere in Ontario. That said, I'm confident that everybody joining this meeting this morning will find the report equally beneficial. To everyone joining this virtual call today, I commend you for your ongoing interest and engagement in the community, for your support, financial and otherwise, your effort, and for the vitally important roles you and your involvement play for our residents. And I encourage you and hope you will stay involved and continue to contribute. Contributions are vital if we're to improve the quality of life in Prince Edward County. We also look forward to listening to you and learning how the municipality can support you and how we can work together now and into the future. So thank you again, Brian, Tony, Anne, for the invitation to participate this morning and for your time today to everyone in attendance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Brian, are you ready to go?
Great. Thanks very much, Tony, and thank you very much, Steve, and welcome all, and thank you very much for joining us. Little doubt that in mid-March 2020, our life changed for everybody in the county. Certainly how we communicate, work, shop, learn, travel, socialize, pretty much everything that we do. In many respects, this was considered initially as a medical impact, but indeed it's human, economic, and social crisis as well, grounded in place. What I mean by that is Prince Edward County is a place, it's a special place. It's located on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. And these people agreed to mutual sharing obligations and responsibilities as stewards of the land and water. We recognize that these are now our shared obligations in partnership with them. So about the project, the purpose of the project was a research report on the county on the overall impact of COVID in the county, and it covered the period March 20th, 2020, which is the date of lockdown, to March 31st, 2021. However, as Steve has mentioned, the pandemic has certainly not been eradicated, and most activities to address it are ongoing. The latest federal budget promises some support over time in several of the key areas that we've addressed in the report, namely healthcare, business and employment, housing, education, and the environment. The purpose and the benefit of the report were threefold. Firstly, to inform priority actions for the county. Secondly, to provide community organizations with the information to support decision-making and their grant applications. And thirdly, to encourage community members such as yourselves to contribute to the well-being of our community in whatever way you can. The methodology that we employed for the report was statistical data from national, provincial, municipal sources and from studies by community and regional organizations. Also qualitative data from in-depth interviews with 44 county service organizations. And the selected indicators were based on the availability, consistency, reliability, relevance, how current the data was, and the suitability for ongoing tracking. The structure of the report was around 9 key focus areas, which are contained in the County Foundation's 2018 Vital Signs report, which a number of you likely have seen. The key focus areas as well reference the underlying initiatives contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. In terms of looking at people, place, and culture, and the Sustainable Development Goal is around a sustainable community. As you can see from the demographics, our population age, population firstly at 25,464 is actually up 2.9% from 2016, based on the latest projections. The median age is 13 years at least older than Ontario's, probably nearer to 15 at this stage. 5% of our population are BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And interestingly, the age of 65 plus, the senior age here is 34%, which is actually up 14% increase since 2016. Obviously, down the road, this is going to have implications for healthcare and things of that nature. The working age, on the other hand, folks aged 15 to 64, has decreased 4% since 2016, and the concern associated with that around the implications for employment. The sense of belonging has been impacted, certainly during COVID, more so for youth than for seniors. 74% of youth, 74% of seniors versus 85% of youth. Our volunteer base has shifted, a significant drop in the availability of seniors. For example, Community Care for Seniors have had a drop from 400 volunteers to 60 in this time frame. Organizations have had to pivot basically to keep going, service organizations. And a quote from Susan Treverton from Community Living, services are being reshaped. This has been difficult, but we will be a better organization at the end. Understandably, venues-based organizations have been hardest hit, namely arts, entertainment, sports, and recreation. There has been as well an increase in public awareness, and progress has been made around long-standing inequities. Examples of that were Black Lives Matter, a demonstration in Picton which attracted over 1,500 participants, community conversations around the Sir John A. Macdonald statue, which brought issues of truth and reconciliation closer to home, and municipal staff, council, and some organizations are undertaking equity education and training. To create a sense of belonging for all of the county's residents includes acknowledging systemic discrimination and intolerance that has existed. Turning to health and wellness, and the Sustainable Development Goal is around good health and well-being. So looking at the graph, you can see the Hastings Prince Edward infection rates per 100,000, 310 compared to Ontario's 2,392. So just over 10%. And the mortality rate similarly, less than 10%. Prince Edward County, which is a sub-region of Hastings, Prince Edward, the case per 100,000 of infection was 180. So what contributed to this? Well, one is the low density. We have 24 people per square kilometer. Just by contrast, Toronto has over 4,000. Also, right from the beginning, the medical team realized proactively that COVID could be making its way into Canada and indeed the county. And a team of doctors in Prince Edward County got together and figured out a plan as to what they were going to do. The pandemic is straining healthcare resources across the board. Quinte Healthcare reported that their cost associated with COVID was running between $500,000 and $1 million a month. The COVID assessment centers, including the ones set up in the county, required a huge collaboration and resource efforts. Shortages of PPE were addressed as businesses pivoted to make sanitizers, masks, and things of that nature. Also, looking and continuing with health and wellness, you can see from this graph that we have some unique risk factors or chronic disease factors impacting health here. Some of those are things like obesity, heavy drinking, and daily smoking, which you can see the percentages for Hastings Prince Edward are way higher than Ontario overall. You know, our large seniors population, and is as well, about 12% of our residents do not have regular healthcare providers, which is up from 7% in 2016. That compares with about 10% in Ontario. People with disabilities are more vulnerable, and Prince Edward County has about 1,200 residents relying on Ontario Disability Support Program. Mental health has declined. The declining mental health has primarily impacted youth and has gone down from 59%, or basically declining status from 59 to 40%. Those are 65 plus, it's declined only from 71 to 70% in the same period. In terms of healthcare workers, 77% working direct contact with COVID cases reported worsening mental health. Life satisfaction indicator has declined to 40% from 72% in 2018. The opioid crisis has well been intensified, and Hastings Prince Edward had indicated a 30% increase in hospital-attended overdoses in the first 4 months of 2020. In terms of looking at safety, and the Sustainable Development Goal is around peace and justice and strong institutions. And as you can see from the graph, that lockdown contributed to a decrease in property crimes over that period. On the other side, the pandemic heightened the risks of victims of domestic and child abuse. For example, in the first 4 months of 2020, Alternatives for Women experienced a 63% reduction in the number of calls, and that was of great concern to them. Safety problems also arose from an overwhelming number of tourists. Things like traffic congestion, increase in trespassing, illegal parking, 4 drownings all occurred once the lockdown had been lifted in June, late in June. In terms of looking at employment and income, and the Sustainable Development Goal is associated with no poverty, decent work and economic growth, and gender equality. The fallout from COVID has been steep and deep. As you can see from 2019, in Eastern Ontario, which is really a proxy for our area, unemployment went up from 4.9% to 7.7%. It impacted largely smaller businesses, and in Prince Edward County, 98% of the businesses are smaller businesses, way under 100 people. About half of PEC businesses experienced revenue decline of more than 40%. The largest decreases, understandably, were in the areas of accommodation and food services, wholesale and retail, construction, and agriculture. The accelerated trends in remote work, e-commerce, and automation will require reskilling going forward, which will be certainly resource intensive for many industries and many organizations. Employment is affected employment loss has affected people inequitably. The largest decline in employment is amongst part-time and low-wage workers, those without a high school diploma, I'll come back to that, recent immigrants, youth, and women. On the other side, high-wage employment increased fairly significantly during this period. COVID is likely to push more people into poverty. In the county, almost 14% of our population, which is about 3,400 people, are considered to be living on low income. That is after-tax household income of about $30,000. By contrast, affordability from the affordability threshold in the county is considered to be at least double that. 1 in 4 families are at risk of falling into poverty, and in the county that would translate into about 6,000 people. Most susceptible to falling into poverty: single mothers, racialized families, people with disabilities, and elderly singles. Physical distancing measures are changing the way of work and have provided and have created unprecedented challenges to businesses, such as decreases in sales, disrupted sources of supply, vastly increased costs of materials, increased fixed costs like rent, and increased need for technology retaining employees. Switching now to food insecurity, and the Sustainable Development Goal is around zero hunger and no poverty. So in Canada, during the pandemic, food insecurity increased from 10.5% in 2017-18 to 14.6%. And again, that would translate in the county to about 3,700 people. Emergency food distribution in the county increased by 33% during 2020, which really tracks the overall Canadian figures. Interesting to note that 65% of food insecure households are actually in the workforce, namely the working poor. And most at risk are households with low income, single parents, and those who rent rather than own their own homes. The community mobilized quickly to support food access. There were new initiatives established during COVID, things like the Food Depot at the Picton Town Hall, the Prince Edward County Helpline, the Recreation Outreach Center Neighborhood Outreach Response, which provided food and youth member families with food, the PEC Fresh Food Market, which provided fresh fruit and vegetables at wholesale prices, and Table Settings, which was a program of meals for migrant workers. Also Food to Share, which is a very vital food program in our community, produces 180 meals a week, and the Storehouse Food Bank 155 meals a week during this period. Food insecurity is currently being addressed through an empowerment model, which looks to basically shift from a charity model to an empowerment model and addressing the root causes of food insecurity and advocating for systems of policy change. At this stage, only about 25% of food insecure households use food banks for a variety of reasons, largely stigma and other factors. And so there are many other folks obviously not using the food banks who currently are still experiencing food insecurity. Switching for a moment to housing, renting and owning, and Sustainable Development Goal is around a sustainable community. So house prices were pushed higher during the demand from outside of PEC. As you can see from the line at the bottom of the graph, median household incomes increased by only about 12% from 2010 to 2016, and similar amount from 2016 extrapolated to 2020. But by contrast, median house prices in Prince Edward County increased by 75% between 2016 and 2020, with a 19% increase in 2020 alone. That's 8 times median household income, which is way higher than in Canada. Canada overall is under 7. Prices continue to be significantly higher than in neighboring regions, about 40% higher, for example, in Belleville and Quinte West. Houses here are about, on average, $150,000 more in terms of median price. Increase in demand from people who can work remotely or choosing to move to more affordable housing, it's all relative, outside of the GTA. And also, low borrowing costs have contributed to increased house prices. COVID has certainly intensified housing instability. Job and income losses have contributed to difficulty in meeting housing costs. Risk of homelessness has increased. And before the pandemic, about 50% of Prince Edward County renters and about a quarter of the population overall were paying more than 30% of their household income on housing, which is considered to be the affordability threshold. Since that time, rent has increased by 31% in the last year alone, and in fact, since the end of March, even more so, and requires earnings of at least $20 an hour to be able to afford to rent in Prince Edward County. And the current threshold of considered affordability is about $17 an hour. So you can see many, many folks are not able to afford to live here. There's an increased urgency for affordable housing options. A housing shortage is worsening for those who are seeking affordable long-term accommodation. The wait list is for rent geared to income housing is 4 to 6 years. And our vacancy rate is at 0.4%, which is the fourth lowest vacancy rate in Ontario and the second lowest in rural Ontario. Long-term rentals are competing with short-term vacation rentals, which have been legislated, but nonetheless, there are many of them currently still in existence. Of great concern to PC businesses is their inability to hire potential employees. A 2019 report showed that 27% of businesses could not hire due to lack of affordable housing, and this would be even higher at this stage. So looking at education, the Sustainable Development Goal being around education, quality education. If you look for a moment at the graph at the far right-hand side, the graduation rate, the high school graduation rate in the county is way below the Prince Edward average, 76%, Ontario's 87%. And this has significant implications for income, implications for jobs, certainly in the digital age, ultimately implications for housing in terms of affordability and health, leading all to adverse socioeconomic intergenerational effects. The impact of that starts to impact kids in a preschool, at a preschool stage. And as you can see, 37% of Prince Edward County kindergarten students are vulnerable in one or more key domains of early development. And that then translates into lower scores in testing from grades 3 to 10, particularly in the areas of reading, writing, and math, which are very foundational. And that ultimately translates into lower high school graduation rates, and the cycle continues on. Existing academic challenges were intensified by COVID disruptions. Online learning was especially difficult for kids with low income and rural students with limited virtual access. Lots was done, certainly by the school board and others, to support students in a pandemic environment. So laptops were provided and other devices to families with limited technology. Increased mental health was provided by the school board and agencies such as the Recreation Outreach Center, and many forms of virtual support and programming were provided by the Hub Child and Family Center, the PC Library, the museums, County Kids Reads program, and others. Post-secondary education is leveraging technology, and 57% of students at Loyalist reported that their courses and work placements were postponed. On the other side, they offered applied learning experience in 65% of their programs through a combination of remote learning, small classes, labs, and workshops. They even created 20 new programs to address the pandemic during this period that were pandemic related, or to obviate this situation. Looking at transportation, and the Sustainable Development Goal was around a sustainable community. So County Transit, which is a public transit system, a 3-year pilot of an on-demand and a fixed route service to Belleville with transfers to multiple locations, was launched in September in the middle of the pandemic. Quinte Transit, which is a specialized transit service, continued in operation, although their ridership was down 55%. The pandemic interrupted volunteer driving services, escorted services through Volunteer Information Quincy, and Prince Edward County Community Care for Seniors was disrupted, and Quinte Transit was able to assist in some regard. A cycling and transportation master plan was created and will provide transportation options, and hopefully will be rolled out during the summer. In terms of looking at the environment and the Sustainable Development Goal, again, was around a sustainable community, lockdown during the pandemic cast a real spotlight on our outdoor spaces. The beach natural areas were overrun as a result of beach and park closures, resulting in overcrowding and safety concerns. Provincial, regional, and municipal planning is underway and has taken place to manage day use volume in 2021. So hopefully we'll see a very different situation. Environmental impacts were somewhat mixed, have been mixed over the last year in terms of, on the negative side, reliance on single-use plastics. Also, provincial water quality monitoring was postponed in some cases. On the positive side, certainly initially, air pollution was decreased by up to 60%. Planning is being ramped up to protect the county's natural heritage, and the new official plan seeks to create some balance between development and protection of the natural heritage. So this crisis, on the flip side, does provide a catalyst for change going forward. What does this comprise? Where do we see some benefits coming out of this? With digitization, the trends towards e-commerce, increase in tech literacy and capacity obviously has come about significantly during this period. The flip side of that, however, is the digital divide has become even more apparent for those of lower income. Remote work is now at 40%, which is up 13% since 2018. Things like e-commerce, local shopping, community-supported agriculture all flourished during this period. Community leaders really stepped up with adaptability and innovation. New processes and programs were developed. Large-scale coordinated efforts mitigated the impact of food insecurity, as I've mentioned. Affordable housing projects are underway. Currently, between 150 and 200 units are hoped to be completed in the next 2 to 3 years. And environmental and tourist management plans were established. As well, public transportation was launched, so a lot of new initiatives. At the same time, perceptions, beliefs, and social norms were shifting. Personal safety and social connections had taken an ever higher priority. Heightened awareness of discrimination and inequities came to the fore. A decrease in stigma around mental health became evident, and engagement to the nature and green spaces were highlighted. Collaboration and sharing of resources took place on a large scale. The crisis does present an opportunity to make lasting change. Building back better includes not only an economic recovery, but attending to societal risks such as inequality, mental health, and inclusion that have been brewing for a long time. Crisis presents a unique opportunity for renewal, and it is possible, we believe, to emerge in a better place. So our thanks are due to many, many people and organizations that contributed to this report. Tony mentioned the design team, but certainly all of the organizations that participated in the research and so on as well. The full report, all 57 pages of it, and a summary is available online at our website, thecountyfoundation.ca/COVID report. And importantly, this report was financially supported through the Federal Emergency Community Support Fund, the county, and the County Foundation. So what does the County Foundation actually do? For those of you who mightn't be conversant with it, well, it has a vision to improve the lives of present and future generations in the county by working collaboratively to build a place where people can live and work and participate and reside. Its mandate is to inspire giving and to make and manage grants. It also provides leadership and administrative support to organizations working collectively and collaboratively in the areas of food insecurity, learning, and transportation. It also publishes reports such as this on a regular basis, vital signs reports, which are intended to inform decision-making and granting. So how can you help? There are a number of ways in which we could certainly look to participation and engagement of the community. One is around advocating and supporting funding for our long-term sustainable solutions, particularly in the areas of poverty, education, food insecurity, housing, health, and safety. Volunteering, contribution of time can make a huge difference, and there's an amazing array of talent that exists in this community. Learning more about what we do and activities going on at the County Foundation, and the full report provides over 200 different information or data points around the things that we've been talking about, and also sharing what you've learned, increasing public awareness, which ultimately will lead to high levels of engagement, also helping to reduce stigma and increasing understanding.